Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, distinguished members of Congress, on this, one of the most moving occasions of my life, my first words must be to say thank you for granting me this rare privilege of addressing a joint meeting of the United States Congress. My thoughts turn to 3 earlier occasions when a British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, has been honoured by a call to address both houses. Among his many remarkable gifts, Winston held a special advantage here. Through his American mother, he had ties of blood with you. Alas for me, these are not matters we can readily arrange for ourselves. Those 3 occasions deserve to be recalled because they serve as lamps along a dark road which our people trod together. And they remind us what an extraordinary period of history the world has passed through between that time and ours. And they tell us what later generations in both our countries sometimes find hard to grasp, why past associations bind us so closely. Winston Churchill's vision of a union of mind and purpose between the English-speaking peoples was to form the mainspring of the West. No one of my generation can forget that America has been the principal architect of a peace in Europe which has lasted 40 years. Given this shield of the United States, we have been granted the opportunities to build a concept of Europe beyond the dreams of our fathers. A Europe which seemed unattainable amid the mud and slaughter of the First World War and the suffering and sacrifice of the Second. When, in the spring of 1945, the guns fell silent, General Eisenhower called our soldiers to a service of thanksgiving. In the order of service was the famous prayer of Sir Francis Drake. O Lord God, when thou givest to thy servants to endeavour any great matter, grant us to know that it is not the beginning but the continuing of the same until it be thoroughly finished, which yieldeth the true glory. On this day, close to the 40th anniversary of that service and of peace in Europe, one of the longest periods without war in all our history, I should like to recall those words and acknowledge how faithfully America has fulfilled them. For our deliverance from what might have befallen us, I would not have us leave our gratitude to the tributes of history. The debt the free peoples of Europe owe to this nation, generous with its bounty, willing to share its strength, seeking to protect the weak, is incalculable. We thank and salute you. Of course, in the years which separate us from the time when Winston Churchill last spoke to Congress, there have been disappointments as well as hopes fulfilled. The continued troubles in the Middle East, famine and oppression in Africa, genocide in Southeast Asia, the brutal occupation of Afghanistan, the undiminished agony of tortured Poland, and above all, the continued and continuing division of the European continent. From these shores, it may seem to some of you that by comparison with the risks and sacrifice which America has borne through 4 decades, and the courage with which you have shouldered unwanted burdens, Europe has not fully matched your expectations. Bear with me if I dwell for a moment on the Europe to which we now belong. It is not the Europe of ancient Rome, of Charlemagne, of Bismarck. We who are alive today have passed through perhaps the greatest transformation of human affairs on the continent of Europe since the fall of Rome. In but a short chapter of its long history, Europe lost the position which it had occupied for 2,000 years. And it is your history as much as ours. For 5 centuries, that small continent had extended its authority over islands and continents the world over. For the first 40 years of this century, there were 7 great powers: the United States, Great Britain, Germany, France, Russia, Japan, Italy. Of those 7, 2 now tower over the rest: the United States and the Soviet Union. To that swift and historic change, Europe, a Europe of many different histories and many different nations, has had to find a response. It's not been an easy passage to blend this conflux of nationalism, patriotism, sovereignty into a European community. Yet I think that our children and grandchildren may see this period, these birth pangs of a new Europe, more clearly than we do now. They will see it as a visionary chapter in the creation of a Europe able to share the load alongside you. Do not doubt the firmness of our resolve in this march towards this goal. But don't underestimate what we already do. Today, out of the forces of the alliance in Europe, 95% of the divisions, 85% of the tanks, 80% of the combat aircraft, and 70% of the fighting ships are provided, manned, and paid for by the European allies. And Europe has more than 3 million men under arms and more still in reserve. We have to. We're right in the front line. The frontier of freedom cuts across our continent. Members of Congress, the defense of that frontier is as vital to you as it is to us. It is fashionable for some commentators to speak of the 2 superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, as though they were somehow of equal worth and equal significance. Mr. Speaker, that is a travesty of the truth. The Soviet Union has never concealed its real aim. In the words of Mr. Brezhnev, the total triumph of all socialism all over the world is inevitable. For this triumph, we shall struggle with no lack of effort. Indeed, there has been no lack of effort. Contrast this with the record of the West. We do not aim at domination, at hegemony in any part of the world. Even against those who oppose and who would destroy our ideas, we plot no aggression. Of course we are ready to fight the battle of ideas with all the vigor at our command. But we do not try to impose our system on others. We do not believe that force should be the final arbiter in human affairs. We threaten no one. Indeed, the alliance has given a solemn assurance to the world. None of our weapons will be used except in response to attack. In talking to the Soviet Union, we find great difficulty in getting this message across.